Thanks for clicking on this video. I really appreciate you being here. If you enjoy the story, consider subscribing and feel free to like the video or drop a comment below. It really helps the algorithm recommend these videos to you and to others who might enjoy them too. Either way, thanks for giving it a chance, and I hope it pulls you in. I have not spoken above a whisper in 3 weeks. I have not laughed, have not shouted, have not made any sound louder than a breath. I move through my house in sock feet, communicate in gestures and written notes, eat cold food from cans because cooking makes too much noise. This is my life now. This is everyone's life now, everyone who survived. Before I tell you about the silence, I need to tell you about the last day of noise, the last day when we could speak freely, when we could live without fear of being heard. The day the alert started counting down to the end of everything we knew. My name is Isaac Thornton. I was a paramedic in Dunmore, a city of about 400,000 people. I say was because there are no paramedics anymore, no hospitals, no ambulances, no infrastructure at all. There is only survival and the things that hunt us when we forget to be quiet. It started on a Monday morning in early February. I remember the date because I had been looking forward to the weekend, had plans to visit my brother 2 hours away, had a life that extended beyond the next 5 minutes. I was getting ready for my shift at the hospital, eating cereal at my kitchen table, watching the morning news without really paying attention. The weather forecast was calling for a cold week, and I was thinking about whether I had enough firewood stacked on my back porch. Then my phone buzzed with an emergency alert, and my television switched automatically to the emergency broadcast system, and everything changed. Emergency alert for all regions. All electrical power will be permanently disabled in 24 hours. This action is necessary and cannot be prevented. Prepare accordingly. Further instructions will follow. I read it several times, certain I was misunderstanding something. Permanently disabled, not temporarily interrupted, not rolling blackouts, not a scheduled maintenance window. Permanently, as in forever, as in never coming back. I picked up my phone and checked the news apps, checked social media, checked every source of information I could think of. The alert was everywhere. Every channel on television showed the same message. Every website had it bannered across the top. Every phone in the country, maybe in the world, had received the same warning. 24 hours, and then no more power, forever. I called my supervisor at the hospital, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Isaac, are you seeing this?" "I am seeing it. What do we do? Should I come in?" The hospital is chaos. We have patients on ventilators, people on dialysis, newborns in incubators. If this is real, if the power actually goes out. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Stay home for now. There is nothing you can do here that we are not already trying to do. I will call you if that changes. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, cereal forgotten, watching the alert scroll across my television screen. I tried to imagine what the world would look like without electricity. No lights, no heat, no refrigeration, no communication, no transportation. Everything we had built over the past century and a half, everything that made modern life possible, gone in an instant. But the that stuck in my mind was not gone. It was permanently. Someone, somewhere, had made a decision that the power was not just going out. It was never coming back. This was not a disaster. This was deliberate. Who had the authority to make that decision? And why? The alert offered no answers. It just kept scrolling, that same message over and over, the countdown clock in the corner ticking away the hours. I could not sit still. I needed to see what was happening, needed to understand how the world was responding to the news that civilization had 24 hours left. I drove through Dunmore as the morning progressed, and what I saw was exactly what you would expect. Panic, confusion, denial. Some people were going about their normal routines, walking to work, dropping kids off at school, pretending that the alert was a hoax or a hack or something that would be explained away by noon. I understood the impulse. If you had spent your entire life in a world with electricity, the idea of that world simply ending was almost impossible to accept. Others had accepted it immediately and were responding with desperate action. Gas stations had lines stretching around blocks, people filling their cars and portable containers with fuel that would run out within weeks, even if they could use it. Grocery stores were being emptied, shelves stripped bare of bottled water and canned goods and batteries. Fights breaking out in aisles over the last packages of something that might keep someone alive for another day. I saw a man loading a shopping cart with candles, hundreds of candles, as if he could hold back the darkness with enough small flames. I saw a woman weeping in her car in a parking lot, phone pressed to her ear, saying goodbye to someone. I saw children looking confused as their parents rushed them back into houses, away from a world that was about to become very dangerous. I went to the hospital even though I had been told to stay home. I needed to help, needed to do something useful in my final hours of normalcy. As a paramedic, I had spent years responding to emergencies, stabilizing patients, making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. But I had never faced anything like this. No one had. The hospital was worse than I had imagined. The parking lot was overflowing, cars parked on sidewalks and grass, people abandoning vehicles wherever they could find space. The emergency department was a scene of controlled chaos. Staff in scrubs rushing in every direction. Patients on gurneys lining the hallways. Families clustered in waiting areas with expressions of terror and confusion. I found Dr. Okafor in the ICU, standing in front of a row of ventilators, his face grey with exhaustion and despair. He was one of the best physicians I had ever worked with, calm under pressure, brilliant in crisis. But this was beyond any crisis either of us had trained for. How many? I asked. 47 on mechanical ventilation in this unit alone, he said, his voice hollow. Another 32 in critical care, 18 in the NICU. Premature babies who cannot breathe on their own yet. Elderly patients whose hearts need pacemakers to beat. People who have been kept alive by machines for years. He shook his head slowly, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. When the power goes out, they will all die within minutes, some within seconds, and there is nothing we can do. We cannot hand ventilate 47 patients indefinitely. We cannot manually pump blood for 32 people. We cannot keep 18 incubators warm with body heat. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I had never seen from him before: defeat. I became a doctor to save lives. And tomorrow, I am going to watch dozens of my patients die while I stand here, helpless. I helped where I could, which was not much. I moved patients, carried supplies, held hands with families who were realizing they were about to lose loved ones. I watched nurses weeping in supply closets and doctors staring at walls trying to process the unprocessable. The hospital chaplain was going room to room, offering what comfort faith could provide in a world that was about to become very dark. But there was no real helping, just delaying the inevitable, just rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. The machines would stop, and the people connected to them would stop too. And there was nothing any of us could do to change that. Around noon, another alert came through. Update: power disabling will occur at 7:15 tomorrow morning. All citizens should secure shelter and supplies. Do not attempt to prevent or interfere with power shutdown. This action is being taken for your protection. For your protection. I read those words over and over, trying to understand. Protection from what? What could possibly be worse than the collapse of modern civilization? What threat could justify killing everyone who depended on powered medical equipment? Everyone who would freeze without heat? Everyone who would starve without refrigeration and transportation? The alert did not explain. It never explained. It just told us to prepare and to trust that this was necessary. I left the hospital as evening approached. There was nothing more I could do there, and I needed to prepare my own home for whatever was coming. I stopped at a hardware store that had not been completely looted. The shelves were mostly empty, but I found flashlights and batteries, candles and matches, a small camping stove, some canned food that no one else had wanted. The cashier's hands were shaking as she took my money. "What do you think is going to happen?" she asked me. I looked at her, this young woman who had probably never experienced a world without electricity, who had grown up surrounded by screens and devices and the constant hum of powered civilization. "I do not know," I said. "I do not think anyone knows." She nodded, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "I keep thinking I should call my mom, but I do not know what to say. How do you say goodbye to everyone?" I did not have an answer for her. I just took my bags and left. My neighborhood was quiet when I got home, but not the peaceful quiet of a normal evening. This was a tense quiet, the silence of people waiting for something terrible. My neighbors were gathered in small groups on porches and driveways, talking in low voices, sharing what little they knew. Howard Finch waved me over as I was carrying my supplies inside. Howard was my next-door neighbor, a retired electrical engineer in his 70s who had lived in that house for longer than I had been alive. He was sitting on his porch with a bottle of whiskey, watching the street like he was memorizing it. "Hell of a thing," he said as I approached. "Have you heard anything? Any explanation for what is happening?" Howard took a sip of his whiskey and nodded slowly. "I have been listening to the ham radio operators. Old technology does not depend on the grid. They are still talking, sharing information from all over the world." "What are they saying?" "The alerts are global. Every country, every language, all saying the same thing. This is not an attack, not one nation against another. This is coordinated, planned. Someone, or something, decided this had to happen everywhere at once. I sat down on the porch steps, my legs suddenly weak. But why? What could possibly justify this? Howard was quiet for a long moment. Some of the operators have theories. Some say the power grid has become unstable, that a cascading failure is inevitable. Others say something has been detected, something that feeds on electrical energy, something that has been growing. A few claim to have heard fragments of other alerts, alerts that never made it to the public, alerts that explained more. What did they say? One operator in Norway, before his transmission cut out, said he heard something about containment failure. Howard looked at me, his old eyes sharp despite the whiskey. I do not know what that means, but I know that someone, somewhere, decided this was necessary, that turning off all the power in the world was better than the alternative. What alternative? Howard shook his head. That is what scares me. What could be worse than this? I went back to my house and spent the evening preparing. I filled every container I could find with water, knowing the pumps would stop working when the power died. I packed all my food into a cooler with ice that would melt within days. I gathered blankets and warm clothes, flashlights and candles, everything I might need to survive in a world without electricity. Then I lay in my bed and tried to sleep, knowing it might be the last time I slept in a warm house, in a lit room, in the world I had always known. I did not sleep well. I woke before sunrise, my body refusing to let me rest while the countdown continued. I checked my phone and saw that 4 hours remained until the shutdown. The television was still broadcasting the alert, now with a countdown timer in the corner that ticked away the seconds. I made coffee while I still could, sat at my kitchen table, and watched the sky lighten through my window. I tried to memorize the feeling of normalcy, the hum of the refrigerator, the warmth of the heating system, the glow of the light over my table. I would never experience these things again. Around 5:30, another alert came through. The final alert. Final update. Shutdown will proceed as scheduled. Once power is disabled, it cannot be restored. The threat has been contained for decades by electromagnetic interference from global power grids. Containment has failed. Shutdown is the only remaining option. Stay indoors. Stay quiet. They are drawn to sound and movement. I read the words, and my coffee went cold in my hands. The threat. They, drawn to sound and movement. This was not about power failure. This was not about grid instability or energy conservation or any of the mundane explanations people had been hoping for. This was about something else entirely. Something that had been kept away, kept dormant, by the constant hum of electricity that surrounded modern civilization. And now it was being released. I thought about what the alert was really saying. For decades, the power grid had been doing more than providing electricity. The electromagnetic fields generated by power lines, transformers, generators, all of it had been creating interference. A barrier, a wall between our world and something else. But containment had failed. Whatever that meant, however it had happened, the barrier was no longer enough, and the only option now was to remove it entirely, to go dark, go silent, and hope that whatever was coming would pass us by. I went outside and found my neighbors gathered in the street, everyone holding phones, everyone staring at the same message. Some people were crying, some were praying, some were just standing there, faces blank with shock. Howard was on his porch with his whiskey, same as the night before. "They kept it from us," he said when I approached. "All these years, they knew something was out there, and they never told us. They just built their grid and let us live in ignorance while the electricity kept us safe. What do we do now?" Howard looked at me with sad, tired eyes. "We do what the alert says. We stay indoors, we stay quiet, and we hope that whatever is coming does not find us." The countdown reached 1 hour, then 30 minutes, then 15. I went back inside my house, locked the doors, drew the curtains. I sat in my living room with a flashlight in my hand, thinking about the alert. They are drawn to sound and movement. I wondered if light counted as movement, wondered if I should stay in complete darkness. I decided to wait, to observe, to learn the rules before I made any mistakes. 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. I held my breath as the countdown reached 0. At exactly 7:15, everything stopped. The lights went out. The refrigerator stopped humming. The heating system went silent. But it was more than that, more than just the absence of powered devices. I could feel it, a change in the air, a void where something had always been. The constant background hum of civilization, the electromagnetic buzz that had surrounded humanity for over a century, was gone. I had never consciously noticed it before, but now that it was absent, I could feel its loss like a missing limb. The world was quieter than it had ever been, quieter than it was supposed to be, and the silence pressed against my ears like something physical. For several minutes, nothing happened. I sat in the dim morning light filtering through my curtains, waiting, barely breathing. Then I heard something outside, a sound unlike anything I had ever heard. Low and strange, like wind but not wind, like voices but not voices. A susurration that seemed to come from everywhere at once, that seemed to vibrate in my bones rather than my ears. I moved to the window carefully, slowly, making no sound. I peeled back the curtain just enough to see the street. At first, everything looked normal. Houses and cars and trees, exactly where they had always been. The morning light was grey and pale, casting long shadows across the pavement. Then I saw movement. Something was coming down the street, not walking, not crawling, but flowing, shifting, like smoke given form, but darker than smoke should be. It was dark despite the morning light, dark in a way that hurt to look at, that made my eyes want to slide away and focus on something else. It moved past houses without stopping, past cars, past everything, just flowing down the street, searching for something. Then it stopped in front of Howard's house. Howard was still on his porch, still sitting in his chair, whiskey in hand, watching the world change around him. I wanted to scream at him, wanted to pound on my window and tell him to get inside, to hide, to be quiet. But I could not make a sound. I could not draw attention to myself. The dark shape moved toward Howard's porch, flowing up the steps like liquid shadow. Howard raised his glass in a toast, said something I could not hear through the glass. Then the shape engulfed him. It happened so fast I almost missed it. One moment Howard was there, an old man facing the end of the world with whiskey and dignity. The next moment he was gone, and the shape was moving on, continuing its search down the street. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. Tears were streaming down my face, but I did not make a sound. I could not make a sound. More shapes appeared, dozens of them, flowing through the neighborhood like a dark tide. They moved between houses, around cars, through yards, searching, hunting. They did not seem to communicate with each other, did not seem to have any organization or plan. They just moved, endlessly, tirelessly, drawn by every sound, investigating every vibration. A dog started barking somewhere down the street, a frantic, desperate sound of an animal that did not understand why its world had changed. I heard the shapes change direction, heard them converging on the sound, flowing toward it from every direction. The barking grew louder, more panicked, as if the dog could sense them coming. Then it stopped abruptly, cut off mid-bark, and I knew the dog was gone. A baby crying. Somewhere to my left, a baby crying in a house where the parents probably did not know yet, did not understand that their child's voice was a beacon leading death straight to them. The crying went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. Not the gradual quieting of a baby being soothed, just stopping, suddenly and completely. A woman screaming, a man shouting, someone running, their footsteps pounding on the pavement, breath coming in gasps. Each sound drew the shapes like moths to flame, and each encounter ended the same way. People taken, absorbed, erased from existence without leaving a trace behind. I sat perfectly still in my darkened house, barely breathing, listening to my neighbors disappear one by one. I heard sounds I will never forget. Sounds of people realizing too late that noise meant death. Cries that cut off suddenly and left only a silence more terrible than any scream. I heard a child calling for its mother, and then nothing. I heard an old man praying out loud, his voice rising with desperation, and then nothing. I heard someone pounding on a door, begging to be let in, and then nothing. Each nothing was worse than the sound that preceded it. Each silence was a death I could not prevent, a neighbor I could not save. I did not move for hours. By afternoon, the sounds had faded. The shapes had moved on, searching other streets, hunting other neighborhoods. I risked a look outside and saw empty streets, abandoned cars, houses with doors hanging open and windows broken. Some houses were closed up tight, curtains drawn, no signs of life. Survivors like me, hiding in silence, waiting for whatever came next. I saw no bodies, no evidence of what had happened to the people who were taken. They were simply gone, as if they had never existed at all. A knock at my back door made my heart stop. Soft, careful, 3 quick taps repeated twice. Not the sound of something hunting, the sound of someone trying not to be heard. I moved silently to the door and peered through the window. A woman was standing there, young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair and terrified eyes. She had her finger pressed to her lips, the universal sign for silence. I opened the door, and she slipped inside without a word. We stood in my kitchen, looking at each other, communicating with gestures and expressions. She pointed at herself, then mimed writing. I found a pen and paper. Her name was Nora Parrish. She had been hiding in her basement across the street when the shapes came. She had watched through a window as they took her mother, her sister, her neighbors, everyone who made noise, everyone who did not understand the rules in time. She had a battery-powered radio, tuned to a frequency where survivors were communicating in whispered voices and Morse code. The voice on the radio was faint, crackling, barely audible. But what it said confirmed everything I had feared. The same thing had happened everywhere, all over the world. The power shutdown had been coordinated, planned, the only defense against things that had been held back for decades by the electromagnetic interference of the global power grid. The things could not see or smell. They hunted by sound, by vibration, by the noise of living creatures going about their lives. Stay silent, stay still, and you might survive. Move too much, speak too loud, and they would find you. Nora and I established rules for survival. No speaking above a whisper, and even whispers only when absolutely necessary. No walking in hard-soled shoes. We padded around in thick socks or bare feet, feeling our way through the house. No cooking, no fires, nothing that made noise or vibration. We learned to open cans slowly, muffling the sound with cloth. We learned to chew with our mouths closed, to swallow carefully, to even breathe quietly. We ate cold food from cans, beans and vegetables, and soup that tasted like survival, that tasted like staying alive for one more day. We communicated in writing, passing notes back and forth, developing a shorthand of gestures and expressions that let us convey meaning without sound. We moved through my house like ghosts afraid of haunting, stepping carefully, touching nothing that might make noise, existing in a bubble of enforced silence. The hardest part was the fear. Every creak of the house settling made my heart stop. Every gust of wind outside sounded like them returning. Every moment of every day was spent listening, waiting, afraid that the next sound I heard would be the last thing I ever heard. Night came, and the shapes returned. I could hear them outside, that strange not wind sound passing through the streets, hunting for anyone who had forgotten to be quiet. They moved more slowly at night, more deliberately, as if the darkness made them stronger, more patient, more thorough in their search. Nora and I sat in the complete darkness of my living room, not moving, not breathing, listening to them pass by outside. Sometimes they would stop in front of my house, and I would feel my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. But they always moved on, continued their search, left us alone for another night. We survived that first night, and the night after, and the night after that. Days became a week became two. Nora and I found other survivors, communicated through the radio, built a small community of the silent. We learned the patterns of the shapes, learned when they hunted and when they rested. Daylight was safer, but not safe. Night was dangerous, but survivable if you stayed quiet. Over the radio, we pieced together what had happened, what had really happened, not the sanitized version in the emergency alerts. The things had always existed, in the spaces between, in the frequencies humanity could not perceive. For millions of years, they had been here, hunting whatever made noise, whatever moved, whatever lived. They were the reason our ancestors feared the dark, the reason ancient humans huddled around fires, the reason every culture has stories of things that hunt in the night. Then humanity discovered electricity, built power grids that spanned continents, filled the world with electromagnetic interference, a constant buzz that pushed the things away, made our world uninhabitable for them. For over a century, we lived in safety without ever knowing we were safe, without ever knowing what we were being protected from. But the things adapted, found ways through the interference, began to break containment, appearing in isolated incidents that were covered up, explained away, hidden from the public. The shutdown was a last resort. The people who knew the truth realized that the barrier was failing, that the things would soon break through entirely. If that happened, with the power still on, with all of humanity making noise as usual, the casualties would be beyond counting. So they made a choice. Warn everyone, give them 24 hours to prepare, then shut down the grid and hope that silence would save more than electricity had. I think about that choice sometimes. The people who made it, who knew they were ending modern civilization, who knew millions would die. I do not know if I would have had the courage to make that decision, but I understand why they did. 3 weeks have passed now. I have not spoken above a whisper in all that time. I have forgotten what my own voice sounds like at normal volume. I have forgotten what music sounds like, what laughter sounds like, what the noise of a living world sounds like. But I am alive. Nora is alive. A few dozen others in our neighborhood are alive. We are learning to survive in silence, learning to live without all the things we thought we needed. The shapes are still out there. They hunt every night, search every day, looking for anyone who forgets the rules. We hear them sometimes, that strange not wind sound passing through our streets, and we freeze and wait and hope. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if humanity can survive in a world where noise means death, where the simple act of speaking can get you killed. I do not know if we will ever be able to rebuild, ever be able to restore the power that kept us safe for so long. But I know we will try. We will learn. We will adapt. Humanity has always adapted, has always found ways to survive against impossible odds. This morning, I stood at my window and watched the sun rise over a silent city. The shapes had retreated with the night, gone wherever they go when the light returns. The streets were empty, the houses were quiet, and for a moment, it almost looked peaceful. I thought about all the sounds I will never make again. Laughter and music and shouting for joy. The simple pleasure of having a conversation at normal volume, of calling out to a friend across the street, of living without fear of being heard. I thought about Howard, who faced the end with whiskey and courage, who did not hide from what was coming. I think about him every day, and I thought about the future. Whatever future there can be in a world of silence, a world where we walk on soft feet and speak in whispers and never, ever forget that something is listening. A world where children will grow up learning to be quiet before they learn to talk. Where silence is not just golden, but necessary for survival. The hum of electricity was never just power. It was protection. A barrier we built without knowing what we were keeping out. A wall that kept the darkness at bay for over a century. Our ancestors knew about the things in the dark. They warned us in their stories, in their myths, in the fears they passed down through generations. But we forgot. We built our electric lights and our noisy machines, and we forgot why we were ever afraid of the dark in the first place. Now we remember. Now the wall is down. Now we have to protect ourselves, one silent day at a time. If you are reading this, if you survived, remember the rules. Stay quiet, stay still, stay alive, and never forget that the things are still out there, listening, waiting, hunting for anyone who forgets that silence is the only thing keeping us alive.